Welcome, friends, to another episode of the Confidence to Homeschool podcast. I am so super excited. I have my friend Sierra here with me today, and she has just been such a lovely friend that I have had in my life for 6 years now. It's been a hot minute. And so she recently had moved to California for a couple of years, and now she is back here in North Carolina with me, and I am so stinking excited to have her back. But I knew that she was just going to be a wealth of information for all of my listeners. So I want to welcome her on, and welcome Sierra.
Thanks for having me, Kelsey.
I'm so happy that you're here. I'm so happy you're here. Okay, so I want to start it out. Just tell me a little bit about your homeschool journey. What made you decide that you wanted to homeschool? All the things.
Great. So I started researching homeschooling when I was pregnant with my first son over 12 years ago now.
Oh, wow.
Husband is in the military. I wasn't all that excited about Southeastern schools.
Yeah.
And so I just felt like it might be an option for us if we wanted to use it. When my oldest was getting ready to enter kindergarten, we applied for a new charter school in the area.
Yeah.
And his number was selected, so we decided to try that out. And so for kindergarten and first grade, he went there. For second grade, he ended up going to the local public school with my middle child as well, going into kindergarten, and then COVID started.
Yeah.
So when everybody went virtual that March, we obviously went virtual, made it work. I was also working full-time at that time, and my husband, I think he was around then still. But yeah, we kind of utilized that time as the kickoff to our homeschool journey because when it came time for the kids to go back in the fall, my husband didn't want them going back masked. Yeah. So he said, you're either going to homeschool them or you're going to use the virtual school.
Yeah, take your pick.
Yeah. So at the time, I wasn't that impressed with what I had seen of the virtual school. And so I just decided to try it. I had good people in my life like yourself who were kind of, really enthralled in homeschooling. And I figured, why not us,
Yeah.
So my youngest was going into kindergarten at that time, and then I had the first grader and third grader.
Yeah.
So we started homeschooling and, didn't really look back until this year when we had another PCS, and my boys were struggling with that move.
Yeah.
They just were really sad to leave friends, and my oldest is in middle school, so he was just like, I want to go back to public school.
Yeah.
So now he is in the public school here, and he's doing well. But we have loved every minute of our homeschool journey. I still have my daughter at home, and she thinks this is her best year yet. I think she's really liking that one-on-one time.
Yes. But, yeah. I think that there is so much to the one-on-one time as well. I think that there are multiple different kids' personalities, obviously. Mm-hmm. And sometimes that one-on-one time just lights a kid up, you know? I definitely love that. So, well, that is awesome. I love the fact that you have done such a wonderful job of taking it by child as well as by year, and you guys have just kind of figured out what's going to work for our journey this year with each specific kid and allowing them to have a voice into what it is that they want as well. I love your ability to just kind of go with the flow of it and make it not like this big scary ordeal or whatever. I just love the fact that you can do that.
I think it's really important, to have flexibility.
Yeah.
When you're homeschooling and when you have kids, especially multiple kids. every child learns differently, and I think that's why homeschooling can be such a blessing, because you can really meet them where they need to be as the parent. Whereas if they are having to go to public school, you know, usually they're surrounded by like 25 to 35 other students, there's one teacher, and it can be a little difficult to get that one-on-one time.
Right.
I think we were really lucky in, you know, having the time as a family that we did for homeschooling, and just really establishing a good foundation in those younger years.
Yeah.
And I'm grateful, you know, to be able to work full-time and homeschool too.
Yeah.
I know that is not something that everybody can do, but we have been very lucky.
I love it. And so you work from home.
Yes.
All right. And so we're going to come back to that,
Okay.
the whole working part of it, here in a little bit. But first, I want to dive into your time in California homeschooling. So you started originally homeschooling here in North Carolina. Whenever you were leaving, we met at a coffee shop and we were trying to figure out like California and their rules and their thoughts.
Yeah.
But you were putting them in skateboarding, right, at that time, and all the things?
Yeah, it was a huge blessing for our family homeschooling in California for 2 years. There's 3 different options in California to homeschool. So you can file an affidavit to, you know, become your own private school, file all your paperwork yourself, do everything on your own, and just submit to the state, you know, any of your attendance records, that sort of thing. You can also kind of work like privately from home with like a tutor who's teaching, or you can work with a charter school. And when you partner with the charter school, some of them in the area allow your kids to go, like if they have a central school location, they can go for a couple days a week and do extracurricular activities, or they can go and do actual learning on campus. And then other charters don't have a physical building, and you just meet with your teacher that you're kind of connected with through the program, like usually every 4 to 6 weeks, just to let them see progress of what the kids are working on. And then you also get funds. Which
for extracurriculars, right?
You can use it for curriculum. You can use it for extracurriculars. If you're going to purchase curriculum with it, it has to be secular. Like you can't purchase any Catholic or Christian or any kind of religious materials.
Okay.
But since we had been homeschooling in North Carolina already, I just continued using what we used. It was more faith-based, I guess, but still on the secular side. We used the good and the beautiful.
Yeah.
And my teacher let us, you know, she would look through their books, see all the incredible work that they were doing. And then we'd usually, especially with the older boys, like have them write a paper or something, you know, for submission. Like if they had to submit something for language arts, you know, they would write a paper on the book they're reading, or they could do a research report on, you know, for history or science, that sort of stuff. But we got to use funds, which I think it was like $3,200 a year for each child.
For and each, that's awesome.
Yeah, and so you can use it for things like dance lessons or music lessons, robotics classes.
Oh, very cool.
You can use it for tutors. Like if you feel like, oh man, I'm not that equipped in this specific area, you know, you can use it to go toward that. And I feel like, especially in a state that is very expensive, having that as an option was huge, because my kids got to do so many things. Excuse me, go on so many field trips to different museums and different parks, and just learn so much.
So you can use it for field trips also.
Yeah.
Very cool.
And the schools will even... like the school that we partnered with, you know, they host field trips. So then you got to meet other homeschooling families, you know, and go on these trips with them. And so you develop relationships that way.
Oh, that is so cool.
Yeah.
So one of the other things that we had talked about was how great it was for you to actually have a teacher that you could connect with, and that you guys could kind of just talk on like that, that same level to each other, and her give you feedback and vice versa.
Yeah, it was. And, you know, they did more testing than I would have done, you know, if I was just doing it myself. Like here in North Carolina, we only tested once a year, like the state testing. There in California, we had to do it like 4 times.
Right. Oh my goodness.
Which was a little bit like nerve-wracking But it was also something that I just tried to put, like, it's no pressure. Like, tests, I've always said, don't determine, like, how smart you are, you know? But it was a great way for me just to see how the kids were doing, you know? And if I've always taken our homeschool journey, like, year by year. So, you know, I love it. It's a great benefit. Like, I love being able to spend time with my kids.
Right.
You know, I've never been that mom who's like, oh, I can't wait for my kids to go back to school. You know, I genuinely like having them around. But I never wanted to force it.
Yeah.
You know, so it was really nice to just see where they were in relation to other students their age. Just so if they ever did decide, like, hey, I want to go back to school, like, we know they're ready or they're not.
Yeah.
And honestly, homeschooling is so incredible because of the fact that you get to really work with them, you know, hand in hand on, like, what they're struggling with and figure out why and then move on from it once they've mastered it.
Right.
So even with my boys now being back here in public school in North Carolina, like, they're ahead of the game, you know, for their grade levels, and they're just doing wonderfully. So I'm grateful for that.
I love that.
Yeah.
I absolutely love that. Okay. So how in the world did you do it working full time?
I don't know. I think that's why I'm so tired all the time. Honestly, it's so funny. Like, I'm finding myself this year struggling a little bit, you know, with having 2 in public school, 1 at home, and then working. Like, I still feel like, what are we, 3 months into the school year, and I'm trying to get my feet, like,
still
centered and like with a firm foundation.
I do understand that, yeah.
Because there's just a lot of moving parts now. When they were all home, it was just, it was easier, I think, in a lot of respects. I always did kind of a student-led curriculum, like, you know, with the good and the beautiful, especially like math and language arts, it's pretty much they can do it on their own once you've taught them how to read, which is so hard. Like, teaching a child to read is one of the hardest things I've ever done.
But it's so cool. It's like almost a superpower when you're like, I've taught a human to read.
Yes, it is.
Check me out.
I know. And because kids are so smart, and so it's like they, you know, you're trying to teach them these rules, and they're like, well, that doesn't make sense because it's not true for this. And I'm like, I know. English is hard.
Isn't that the truth?
Yeah.
Have you seen the meme that talks about this is bomb, and then he flips it over and he's like, so this word with the C-O-M-B should be calm, but nope, it's comb. And like he goes through all the different letters of why English makes no sense at all whatsoever. Yes. It is hard to teach them to read. But once you do teach them to read, Good and the Beautiful is a really great curriculum so that they can really just, like, go through it themselves. And so...
And every lesson was already made. Like, I couldn't take the curriculums with my work schedule that needed me to...
do it.
Then, you know, write lesson plans.
Right.
So, for me, it was important to have something that was already pre-planned so I could break it out, like, this is what we need to get done each week, and, you know, stay on track. I think, especially because my kids were so close in age, you know, right now I have a 7th grader, a 5th grader, and a 4th grader. So we did a lot of, like, history and science learning together. As a family. And sometimes that meant, you know, maybe an older one writing a little more detail than the other one when it came to, like, book work. But as a whole, like, we sat there, we did the experiments together, we did, you know, reading together, we listened to audiobooks. So I think it just really helps.
Well, and it helps to bring them together as siblings as well, because I love that. I feel like I have so many friends with kids in public school that their kids hate each other and, like, just can't stand to be around each other. But I know that your kids, and y'all, Sierra is absolutely incredible with her boys and teaching them how to respect girls, and, like, she's really just, like, I've looked at her on multiple occasions and not said out loud, but thought in my own mind, like, I want to be like her when I grow up. Oh gosh, because these boys are just wonderful to their sister, and the boundaries that you set in place and the way that they all function together as a crew is just, like, super sweet. Like, they're so good to each other. And I feel like with my kids, they really are each other's best friends. And so that's one of the things that I love about homeschool and siblings. is that you get to like make them
establish those relationships like
yes,
very strongly
very
versus
strong.
like tearing them apart, you know, to send them to school.
Okay, so I want to go back to working full time real quick and go over like the realistic expectations. So like we talked a little bit about time and how much time that it actually takes. What subjects are you kind of diving into? Like we were talking, your daughter and I were talking the other day about her biology. Is that right? Like human anatomy and stuff. The fact that she's done that, which I think is so cool that you guys went
she's
through.
in 4th grade and she's already done that.
Yeah, I love the fact that which I mean, I was a surgical tech before I, had kids and everything else. So I think it's so fun that she already has like a basic human anatomy understanding. So what are some subjects that you're like are must-haves, good curriculums that you have used that fall well into working and staying at home and homeschooling?
So we've tried a few different things over the years, but I think what we've most enjoyed has been the good and the beautiful for math.
Right.
By far, it's just the one that has worked the best for my kids. And they do offer, reviews after each section to make sure you're understanding and grasping the knowledge, that sort of thing. They also, once you hit 4th grade, there's videos, that they're kind of, there's an instructor who's talking to you about these things, so they can watch them or they can just do the book work. It's whatever you prefer, But for English and language arts, we have done a lot with like fix-it grammar.
Okay.
I think that was really important grammatically, just for them to learn how to write.
Yeah.
And we've done the good and the beautiful for language arts for a couple of years, especially in the beginning. I think it gave a good foundation.
Mm-hmm.
We read a lot together as a family, and I mean like a lot. Like we would read just random books, we'd read chapter books together, and as they get older, let everybody take a chapter.
Oh, I love that.
Sometimes like,
or even as they're younger, a
page. That's what I was just gonna say. Yep, with Maggie, like, she was not always wanting to read, and she would just be like, "Can you read this for me?" And the boys would just do it for her, and I'm like, "No, like she needs to read." Like, it's also why she was my latest walker, because
because they want to do everything for her. We were just talking about that with my youngest today. If he's ever gonna start talking, because everybody talks for him.
Yes, exactly. So it's fun, and reading and writing and math were daily things for us.
Of course.
And we schooled during the summer. Like, we never really took time off per se. It wasn't like, oh my gosh, we have to get this done. But like, if we wanted to go away for 2 weeks or something to visit family, like we can, and we didn't have to worry about schedules that way. But I think like just, having a good foundation in reading and math is so important.
Yeah.
And then science and history are such fun things that can feed into those.
Yeah.
Like, especially as they get older, there's so many great books. Just going to the library and taking out books, or, different, what's this one thing we ordered? I can't think of the name. History Unboxed. How did I forget that? But like, and you can research different topics, and they'll send you like different art projects to kind of incorporate with it. Yeah. And so I think like the more hands-on, especially when they're younger, that they get to be, the easier it is.
I agree.
Because then they're kind of getting it from all wickets, whether they're hearing it, they're seeing it, and they're doing it.
Right.
We listen to a lot of like different podcasts too, or audiobooks if we were driving, especially here in North Carolina, like it takes a while to get everywhere. So use that time to learn, and it's fun. But yeah, I think just, especially if you're going from public school to homeschooling, like give yourself time to just get into a rhythm and not even worry so much about school. Like that will come, but just, learning each other's tempos and how everybody's going to work best together. I mean, I always shared my schedule with my kids, like every day, like I've got a meeting at this time and this time, so we're going to work on this now, because otherwise you're on your own. Yeah. Like, and and it worked for us. It's just having healthy expectations for yourself, for your kids, will help you get through everything that you need to.
Okay, so was there anything different about North Carolina that you actually appreciate their homeschooling methods?
I mean, I think the benefits of, like, the monetary benefits were huge.
Yeah.
Financially. Coming back to North Carolina and paying out of pocket for things like dance and, musical instruction, like, that is a very expensive monthly cost.
Right.
So, even when we knew we were PCSing back, I was like, babe, we're going to have this much more that we're needing to pay for each month, and it's a little stressful.
Yeah.
I think we were very lucky in California. The teacher that we were connected with, I mean, she was a woman in faith, like we talked about God a lot, and she was just a breath of fresh air. Like, she wasn't like Big Brother, just like standing over your shoulder, like, she genuinely cared about us as a family, like, wanted to see the kids grow and learn the things that they were interested in. My oldest is really into robotics and engineering and building and all that kind of stuff. So she helped me find classes for him out there that he could really learn and grow and have hands-on experiences.
I love that.
And so it was so cool because financially speaking, if we didn't have that support, I don't think we would have been able to do all of those things.
Right.
Yeah. So in that regard, like, I wish North Carolina had that as an option.
Yeah.
I think people love North Carolina homeschooling because there's not much reporting going on. You're really just keeping track of attendance.
Yeah.
You are supposed to keep your books, from what I remember, like, up to 2 years, so that if anybody does come and want to see what they've been doing, you can show them. But it's very independent. So if you don't, want to have somebody to work with, you don't need to. Which is great, and it's nice to just be able to do what you want and figure it out as you go. But especially for me, I think it was just nice to kind of have that connection in a new place. But here I am blessed with friends like you, and other homeschoolers who I can learn from and ask questions from if I have them.
Yeah.
So it's just important to find your community, I think, really, whether you're in California, North Carolina, New Mexico, wherever you are.
You can't do it just
alone.
by yourself.
Yeah.
You really do. It really is important to just find your community, find your people, and all the things. Oh.
And it's like, the thing that is so cool about homeschooling is it's not just learning in a building. Like, we love to be outside, so we took learning outside very often, and just experiences. There are so many ways for your kids to learn just how to live life by doing life with you.
Right.
And so I remember even when we were in North Carolina before we left, my soul dog got cancer and was, like, really not doing well. And we were at the vet for a good 4 hours.
Oh, my goodness.
And the doctor had come in and she was just like, are they off today? Like, why aren't your kids in school? And I was like, oh, we homeschool. And she was like, oh, of course you do. She's like, no public school kid could sit here for 4 hours like this, especially at lunchtime, and still be asking me, like, such inquisitive questions.
Right.
And I think that, for me, especially with sending the boys back this year, like, my big thing is, like, ask questions. Like, you're there to learn. You're not there to just memorize and be told what to think. Like, I want critical thinkers, and I think that it's something that I've worked hard on with all of my kids, over the years, and I hope that they will continue to kind of grow with that.
Yeah.
And it doesn't mean you're disrespectful, but it's important, to ask, like, why or how, or that doesn't really make sense because of this,
Right.
So
I absolutely agree. And one of the things that I had wrote in my notes to talk with you about is the fact that when you are homeschooling, it does not mean that you are taking the public school and putting it in your home.
Yeah.
And I know that we've talked about that in this episode, or not in this episode, in this podcast before. I've talked very much about the fact that homeschooling is not school at home. And I think that that's one of the very biggest mindset adjustments of homeschooling is the fact that you can go outside, find something laying on the ground or sitting on the ground like a super cool butterfly, and go ahead and do an entire science day. Like, literally, you could, if you wanted to, you could throw your entire day of homeschooling out and go on this deep dive of this super awesome butterfly you just found. You know, like...
Exactly. And there's so much reading and writing and science behind just one creature, you know,
and
yes, like
and you can literally, you can pull all of the other subjects into that. You can pull reading into that. Okay, let's learn about this, but you have to read it. You can pull writing into it. I want one sentence, or I want 3 words, or I want a full paragraph, or I want a full page. Like, you can literally tailor that to where your kid is and just go with it. You know, like, that is one of my very favorite things about homeschooling, is just the flexibility. Once you get through the mindset of trying to bring public school home, because that is a huge mindset shift of, I think so much we're told that we're not doing enough in the homeschooling community, or people may feel like we're not doing enough because we're not doing school.
For 8 hours.
It takes an hour and a half to 2 hours to do school with Addison. And I was very adamant about the fact that I only wanted to do school for 2 hours or less with her, because I want them to have time to be able to go and explore things on their own and play. And there's so much that they learn from playing or from having time to be bored. Or, you know, having time to just think.
Read books all day, or listen to music.
Listen to music.
Draw. Like my kids all had like sketchbooks, you know, and I think it's something that I ask my boys a lot, you know, like, well, how is this class? Or what are you doing in this class? Or like, why do you guys have homework, you know, if you're working on this in class? And they're like, well, the teacher is spending 40 minutes yelling at these kids because they're jumping around. Or so-and-so wrote on the desks. And so then the teacher had to call their mom, and the teacher had to do this. And it's just like a lot of just like...
back and forth.
And not a real instruction. You know? And so... that's why a lot of people always ask, like, well, how do you work and how do you homeschool? And homeschooling doesn't take that long.
No.
You know, it really doesn't. And I'm sure, like, we haven't hit high school yet, so that will be a different level. But I think, you know, especially the elementary years, like, anybody can do it. And I've had friends who are nurses who homeschool, you know, and you really just, you do school when you can. So maybe that, like, if you work a night shift and then you need to come home and you sleep for a few hours and then you do school, like, that's totally fine. You know, it's not about fitting your learning into 7:30 to 2:30. You know, it's really like, well, the when rules is this going to work?
Rules are off.
And so I think, especially as my kids grew, we figured out, like, you know, when they were most ready to, like, sit and do work. Because, you know, my kids, and one of mine especially, is, like, very outdoorsy and very moving and wants to play all the time. And he does not want to sit there and write math problems, you know. But we did it, and he did great, you know, because he was able to get that energy out in positive ways, you know, by going and riding his bike or playing. Or
so would you have him do movement activities before school to get that out?
Definitely. We always would go for a walk, and then he would like ride his skateboard for a while. And, you know, if we were having like a slower morning and he was just feeling tired, like, he might just start with reading and you know, penmanship or something like that, just something easy, and then ease his way into the day. I think for me, like, a big focus was just like their mental health and their want to learn. So not like forcing worksheets down, you know, like, that's not what learning is in education. And, you know, we always had goals to meet, like, they knew what they needed to do, but a lot of it was like just about, like, what are you interested in? What do you want to learn about? So even one of my first papers was on Tony Hawk, because he was really interested in skateboarders, and so he was reading all these books about Tony Hawk, and I was like, great, well, let's write a book report on him, you know?
Well, and those people, though, that have made it and worked hard, like, they have a story to tell as well. Like, they worked really hard. Tony Hawk worked really hard in order to get where he was. He didn't just pick up a skateboard and all of a sudden he's, one of the best ones in the world. Like, it shows them you have to go through rough times as well and fail in order to get to where you want to go. So I feel like...
And have the motivation to get better. Like, that was something that I remember even from, like, Kobe Bryant's memoir, because it was like he would still wake up at 5 o'clock in the morning and he would go and work out, and then he would go to the team workout, and because he always wanted to be better. And that's what I try to tell my kids, that even professionals are still working and learning and wanting to get better and grow, because you never reach this like peak, I know everything. I feel like that's when God's going to call us home if we feel like that, because we're still alive, so we still have something to learn.
Yes.
And so it's like, learning is such a privilege, and it's such a blessing to have knowledge. Like, people cannot take that from you, you know? And so I really have tried to, like, drive home, like, you are so lucky to live in the United States of America, where you get to be educated and you get to read, and we have all these books, and, like, like, nobody can take knowledge from you. The more you learn, like, the further you will go. Yeah. And the more people you can help. I really do believe in giving back.
Thank you so much. I'm so excited that we could do this. That was so good. Left so many good little nuggets of wisdom there. So thanks, I appreciate it.
I appreciate you.
Hey friend, thanks again for joining me today on your journey to the confidence to homeschool. I hope this podcast blessed you with one more tool of success. If it did, please scroll down to the bottom of your screen and leave me a review. Share it with a friend. Just remember, confidence in anything takes practice, so let's grow.